Welcome to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast, a podcast dedicated to exploring the applied philosophy of traditional Stoicism. The College of Stoic Philosophers is an online school founded in 2008. We at the college endeavor to educate all who would be Stoics and Stoic philosophers who aspire to the good life within the world community. Podcast episodes will include discussions of Stoic history, application, interviews, and much more, all while having some fun, fate permitting. I'm your host, Mark Sterry. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. From May 23rd to 25th, 2025, members of the College of Stoic Philosophers faculty met in Athens, Greece. We toured the Acropolis and Parthenon, saw where the original Stoa was, enjoyed each other's company over Greek food and drink, and talked life and philosophy. Each faculty member was asked to give a presentation of their choice to the group. I chose the role of emulating the music archivist Alan Lomax and solely focused on field documenting these presentations. Picture inside a bungalow Airbnb, a wooden table covered with bottles of Greek Coca-Cola, wine, Greek beer selections, and open bags of oregano potato chips, surrounded by 8 practicing traditional Stoics, now friends. Like Lomax recording early folk music, not all audio survived the trip due to equipment malfunction and the cosmos just not allowing it. What you're about to hear is an edited portion of a faculty presentation in this environment while on an adventure of a lifetime. Without further ado, here's Stoic Metaphysics with college founder Erik Wiegardts.
Of Stoic philosophy. Not long ago, God and an atheist were having a conversation about their differences. The atheist was saying that people don't really need God anymore because we human beings can do everything any God can do. And God listened patiently, didn't say anything. The atheist went on about how great our knowledge was these days, bragging really. He talked about how we can split the atom and make energy from nuclear reactors. We can cure most diseases. And before long, we'll even have a cure for cancer. We can send rockets and astronauts to the moon. Our telescopes can look back in time to the beginning of creation and more. God was listening intently and agreed with the atheist that human beings were indeed quite remarkable in what they had accomplished. The atheist was getting bolder now that he could see God was paying attention. So he bragged that we humans could even create life from dirt. And he reached down to the ground they were standing on and scooped up a handful. And God said, "Hey, get your own dirt." I borrowed that from Joel Osteen, a Texas evangelist who preaches to an average of 45,000 parishioners in his mega church in Houston every week, who has a U.S. television audience of 10 million, with an international audience of 100 countries of over 7 million, takes in over $43 million in contributions every year. So next to Joel Osteen, I feel a little bit like the atheist next to God. And unlike Joel Osteen, who's actually a very talented speaker, I have to read my lecture because I don't have the kind of memory that guy has. He's been quite good. You don't have to pay attention to what he says, but you have to admire his ability and how he says it. Part 1, this comes in 4 parts, and part 1 is from medieval to the modern world view. We're going to start our discussion of Stoic Metaphysics as the 4th branch of Stoic philosophy by returning to God and the atheist. But now we're going to travel back in time to the medieval worldview, which began in the 5th century after the fall of the Roman Empire, to the modern worldview, which began with the birth of modern science in the 17th century. I'm going to be leaning heavily on one of my favorite philosophers, Walter Stace, and his book, Religion and the Modern Mind. I should mention that Walter Stace was a philosophy professor who had that rare gift of great intellect combined with the ability to clearly communicate with the rest of us. According to his Princeton University biography, Stace was convinced that, quote, either God was a mystery or he was nothing at all, end of quote. He said, quote, to ask for a proof of the existence of God is on a par with asking for a proof for the existence of beauty. God does not lie at the end of any telescope. Stace claims that in the Western medieval world there were three main philosophical ideas that had near universal belief. One, and obviously God. Two, a world purpose. And three, moral order of the world. All three of these philosophical ideas from medieval times are contained in the physics of classical Stoicism. Classical Stoics believed in God. They believed in world purpose. The technical name for that is teleology. And they also believed in the moral order of the world, an objective moral order of the world. What we mean by the moral order of the world is that the world has a moral order built into it. It's not just something we imposed upon it by our own needs and fears. It is built into the structure of reality. Then, beginning with the birth of modern science, the world was shocked by discoveries in geography that shattered belief the age of our planet was 6,000 years old, as everyone had always been told in the medieval world. And then Darwinian evolution showed humans were related to other animals and evolved from earlier primates, not directly from God's spittle in dirt. And by the way, as an aside, does this sound anything like the Stoic active principle? We have entering and forming this the passive principle to create all material forms of creation. Finally, historical and literary criticism showed that the Bible was not a record of facts dictated by God. And these were the things that had near universal belief in the medieval worldview. And that's what modern science, the modern world, changed in everybody's, most thinking people's minds. But the greatest shock that undermined religious belief in the modern world was not between discoveries of science or religion. It was that the basic assumptions of the scientific view directly conflicted with the basic assumptions of the religious view that we were just talking about. The three medieval ideas about God, world purpose, and the world as objectively moral. With this new information, the modern world became receptive to Nietzsche's announcement that God is dead. Let me read this quote from Stace's work, Religion of the Modern Mind. Quote, Newtonian science produced in men's mind an ever-growing sense or feeling of the remoteness of God. The medieval view of God as being near and miracles showing God's love for those who worshiped him was pushed back to a God of long ago and far away. Quote, if one admits the scientific maxim that every event in nature has a natural cause, it is still possible to bring in God at the beginning as the first cause. But this leads to the conception of a God who, since he does nothing in the world now, is of no practical importance in our lives. So, but what about us? Do these new scientific ideas affect Stoic philosophy? Well, yes and no. Yes, it basically created the schism we have today between the traditional and the modern Stoics. Modern Stoics largely follow the general assumptions of the scientific worldview, that gods are unnecessary and serve no purpose in our lives. And with that, they cut off Stoic physics as irrelevant, focusing on Stoic ethics alone. But we traditional Stoics disagree. We accept the scientific model of physics, and we still hold on to our own version of the three philosophical ideas we have just outlined from the medieval mind. Now, instead of referring to Walter Stace's work, I'm going to compare what you and I know about the classical or traditional Stoic beliefs that are aligned with the three medieval ideas about God, purpose, and the moral order. Number one, the Stoic God. The Stoic God is the cosmos, a living being, rational, animate, and intelligent. This is according to Diogenes Laertes, Book 7, passage 142, And that's basically the Chrysippus doctrine. God pervades and forms the cosmos into a harmonious whole and orders events in a providential manner. Although God is also fate and we exist on a continuous string of causes, the cosmos is more than this mechanical clock concept. The cosmos of the Stoic God is administered by mind and providence. The Stoic God is in nature. God is nature, and nature is a living being, which means that the providence, movement, and order of the cosmos does not depend on any entity outside of nature. Finally, the God of the Stoic cosmos is spherical because, as you know, the sphere was considered the most perfect and beautiful form in classical times, and this sphere is surrounded by an infinite void. That's what gives it room to expand and contract. That was the first idea which we compare with the medieval mind. Number two, the Stoic world purpose, or teleology, is denied by the naturalists who deny a conscious and providential God, accepting only blind evolutionary forces and vegetative processes. By way of contrast, the Stoic God has a purpose, or teleology, and I'd like to quote A.A. Long. You all know, quote, A.A. Long from your studies in Stoicism. I'm quoting A.A. Long in his Cambridge Companion to the Stoics, chapter of Stoicism in the Philosophical Tradition. That's on page 377. The Stoics take their cosmic divinity, this is a quotation, the Stoics take their cosmic divinity to be identical not only with the causality or fate, but also to providence, and they take the world as caused and instantiated by God to be supremely good, beautiful, and designedly conducive to the benefit of its human inhabitants. Further on, Long says, quote, the Stoics suppose that though God is not anthropomorphic, the divine mind has the same faculties as human beings have, and by treating the divine mind as a perfect paradigm of the human intellect, well-intentioned as well as rational, the Stoics wanted to suggest that we can be at home in the universe in ways that are analogous to a citizen living in an excellently administered city, end of quote. Frankly, and this is me speaking, the teleology of the Stoics may appear to us to be rather narrow and self-serving, but in all fairness to classical Stoics, what more can we know of God's purpose? As the apex predator, it does appear that the world is our oyster. With nature's gift of reason, we do not have or need prophets or televangelists of the faiths telling us what God wants. We use reason. That's why we call our God a philosophical God and our theology a philosophical theology. Number three of the three medieval ideas that we compare with, the Stoic moral order. The world is a moral order according to the medieval mind and according to classical Stoics. In short, what we're saying is that we are not just making it up. We are not just making up the idea of the cardinal virtues as the true path to eudaimonia. We are not just making up our belief in our motto of living in agreement with nature, because we know that by living in agreement with nature, human beings live in agreement with reason. That by cultivating reason, we are cultivating wisdom. And by cultivation of wisdom, we learn that the cardinal virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and decorum, are the highest good in human life. All of this classical Stoics found in the study of nature, and today we honor their divine insight. But let me just recap what I said about the Stoic world as an objective moral order, because this is, I think, very important. Number one, the greatest genius or talent of humanity is our reasoning or rational faculty. Eagles have other great abilities, and coyotes have theirs. Zeno, number 2, coined the phrase about living in agreement with nature, and by living in agreement with nature, we cultivate our reason, which is our great talent, and thereby we acquire wisdom. And with wisdom we learn that there is only one good, virtue, because it is the only good that can never be compromised. And when we practice virtue, we become a citadel of strength, impervious to the stern withdrawal of living in a dynamic continuum. And now we come to part 2. Is it Stoic naturalism or Stoic religion? There is a tension built into Stoic philosophy, according to John Sellers in his book Stoicism, page 91, and I quote, "It is possible to give 2 quite different readings of Stoic physics. It is possible to make Stoic physics sound quite modern and thoroughly naturalistic. Alternately, one might read the Stoics as quite religious philosophers, etc." Do you remember reading about that tension between naturalism and religion when you study physics in the Sellers book? It's easy to kind of just run right over that when you're trying to learn physics, Stoic physics for the first time. What Sellers calls quite modern and thoroughly naturalistic is our concept of pneuma, that it has 3 levels of tension within the material forms of nature. And these are the categories of pneuma: cohesion, hexus, a force that gives unity to an object; nature, physis, a principle of life in biological organisms; and soul, psyche, in animals with powers of perception, impressions, movement, impulse, and reproduction. He doesn't mention it there, but there is a 4th category, which is reason, and we reserve for human beings alone. Today we have a few others to add to the reasoning abilities, such as the reasoning of crows and elephants, whales, and dolphins, which, as you know, is very impressive. Very impressive, and the ancients didn't actually realize that 2,000 years ago. If you accept the concept of pneuma as a viable description of evolutionary categories in nature, then you, too, can be comfortable with a Stoic naturalism. And I do find it to be perfectly reasonable codification of evolutionary forms of life. But I'm also completely comfortable with the religious expansion that adds consciousness and providence as attributes of God. If you missed that part about the tension in Stoic physics between naturalistic and a religious interpretation of reality when you read John Sellers' chapter on physics, then you may have also forgotten Zeno's argument for the existence of God, which I find quite interesting. This is Zeno's argument. It's on page 94 of Sellers' book. That which employs reason is better than that which does not. That's the first premise. Second premise, nothing is superior to the cosmos. Therefore, the cosmos uses reason. You may need a little time to think about that, but the same argument can be used for wise, blessed, eternal consciousness, and so on. And if you accept the premises, you must accept the conclusion. Let's be clear about our God. Remember, beginning with Zeno, the Stoic God is a philosophical God based upon argument, not myths, stories, or faith. Kempe Algara says something similar in his chapter, Philosophical Theology. And this philosophical God, or theology, is written right into our physics, because for some reason, the Stoics of antiquity were unable to take theology out of their physics and call it what it is, metaphysics. Would it be proper to call our philosophical theology metaphysics? Do we have a metaphysical body of literature? Yes. But first, let me quote one of my favorite passages from Ludwig Edelstein's lecture series on the Stoics he gave back in 1956 at Oberlin College. Maybe you already know what I'm going to say. I'm sure some of you do. because I've said them so many times that you may already be sick of it, but here's what Edelstein said at the end of this lecture series entitled The Meaning of Stoicism. I'm quoting Edelstein now. I hope to have shown that the Stoic sage is not the stony similitude of Platonists, but if Stoicism be compared with Platonism or Aristotelianism or any other kind of idealism, it will be found, I confess, to lack one ingredient. It does not satisfy what Kant called the eternal metaphysical need of man. Whether or not there is an answer to metaphysical questions, the questions are real, and they cannot be interpreted away. And I agree. Metaphysical questions are real and they cannot be interpreted away. However, Professor Alger and I disagree with Edelstein about not having a metaphysics. We do have a metaphysics. Admittedly, it is not as developed as it could be and will be at the College of Posidonius, but let's take a minute to review what can be said about Stoic metaphysics. Jacques Braunschweig, the late professor of ancient philosophy at the University of Paris, wrote in his chapter Stoic Metaphysics, you may have seen it's also in the Cambridge Companion. I'm quoting Professor Braunschweig on page 206. Is there a Stoic metaphysics? The answer obviously depends on what we mean by metaphysics. In one sense, the Stoics have no metaphysics. In another sense, however, one might suggest that the Stoics had not only one but two metaphysics. One is merely a part of physics. The other is a study over and above their standard tripartition of philosophy. And I'm going to repeat that last sentence because it's very important. One form of metaphysics is merely a part of physics. The other is a study over and above their standard tripartition of philosophy. That's physics, ethics, and logic, as you know. Let me repeat, this last quote is the very foundation of the title of this lecture, Stoic Metaphysics. This is the fourth branch of Stoic philosophy. This is what Stoics had and are creating right now. Metaphysics as a study over and above our standard tripartition of philosophy. Traditional Stoics of the 21st century are developing this fourth branch, the metaphysical branch. According to the late Professor Braunschweig, no Stoic philosopher would have understood what that word metaphysics means, despite its use by Aristotle, because for them nothing came after physics. Quoting the professor again, quote, for them, the Stoics' nature, physis, encompassed everything, including things, phenomena, and events, which in other worldviews might seem to be supernatural in some way. A superficial reading of Stoicism would say we are materialists. After all, we say that everything real is corporeal, but our materialism is both mechanistic and vitalist, teleological, both naturalistic and religious, which is really where we started this discussion about the internal tension pointed out in the Sellers chapter on physics. Which is it? Is it naturalism or religion? Well, it can be either or both. Part 3, is it religion or metaphysics? Religion in classical times didn't exist. What we call religion today could be more appropriately called metaphysics antiquity, although in antiquity that term was not commonly used or understood. So basically what we're talking about is a decision between two terms that we have today that would have been obscure or non-existent in classical times. But we don't have that excuse now. We need to examine these two concepts and get some clarity about what we are, what we believe. So let me start by asking this question. What is the difference between religion and metaphysics? Let's start with metaphysics. We could spend the rest of the hour arguing about the best definition for metaphysics, but let's focus on the plainest definition that I could find, which I found with the help of the internet's artificial intelligence. And that said, quote, metaphysics refers to the philosophical study of reality. Metaphysics essentially attempts to establish a coherent picture of what reality ultimately is. Okay, is that the same study as religion? What is the difference between metaphysics and religion? The internet AI helps us out again. This is what it says about the difference. Metaphysics, I'm quoting this, metaphysics and religion, while related, are distinct. Metaphysics is the philosophical study of the nature of reality, including concepts like existence, time, and space, while religion is a system of beliefs and practices related to the divine or supernatural. Metaphysics is often concerned with the abstract, philosophical questions, while religion typically involves a deeper commitment and a sense of belonging to a community. Okay, so now let's do a little more detailed comparison, also with the help of the artificial intelligence, a little more depth. As to metaphysics, what is the focus of metaphysics? The focus is the fundamental nature of reality, including questions like what is real, what is the nature of consciousness, and what is the relationship between mind and matter. What is the approach? Metaphysics employs philosophical reasoning, analysis, and argumentation to explore these questions, often drawing upon logic and reason. And the goal? To understand the ultimate principles and causes that govern the universe and nature of existence. Now we'll do the same thing as to religion. What is the focus of religion? Beliefs and practices related to the divine or supernatural, often involving worship, prayer, and ethical codes. What is their approach? Religion often relies on faith, tradition, and revelation rather than solely on rational argument. And the goal? To establish a connection with the divine or supernatural, to find meaning and purpose in life, and to guide ethical behavior. As to the key differences between the two, in the methods, metaphysics relies on philosophical inquiry, while religion often relies on faith and tradition. On the beliefs, metaphysics may or may not include beliefs in the supernatural beings, while religion typically, and I'm going to say that again, metaphysics may or may not include beliefs in supernatural beings, while religion typically involves a belief in a higher power or powers. The scope, metaphysics explores a wide range of philosophical questions about reality, while religion often focuses on specific beliefs and practices related to the divine. As to their overlap between the two and their relationship, the shared questions, both metaphysics and religion grapple with the fundamental questions about existence, the nature of reality, and the meaning of life. Their interconnectedness, some religious systems incorporate metaphysical concepts, and some metaphysical thinkers have explored religious ideas. And as to the distinction, it is important to note that while there may be overlap, metaphysics and religion are not the same thing. In essence, metaphysics provides a framework for exploring the nature of reality, while religion offers a way of understanding and relating to that reality, often through faith and a belief in the supernatural. So, okay, but let's remember what Brunschwig says about Stoic metaphysics. For the Stoics, nature encompasses everything, including things, phenomena, and events in other worldviews might seem to be supernatural in some way. So the classical Stoics, in their prescient wisdom, included the invisible world in their corporeal things. And so it would appear that we have a much more reality to explore than mere materialists and academic metaphysics. The part 4 is metaphysics, theory, and practice. And let me just say that I'm a Posidonian Stoic. Some of you know Posidonius of Apamea. He was approximately 135 to 51 before the Christian era, or before the Common Era. He was head of the Stoic school after Panaetius in the historical period known as the Middle Stoa. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, he was considered the most learned man of his time and possibly of the entire Stoic school. His fame attracted numerous scholars, including the Roman statesman Cicero, who studied under him in 78 to 77 BCE, and whom he mentioned as a friend. He was a scientist, a geographer, and a religious mystic. And I named the college that I founded last year after Posidonius because of all the ancient Greek Stoics, with the possible exception of Chrysippus, he was the one who was most interested in metaphysics, the philosophy of theology found in our physics. I agree with Seneca, and this is an important point that I want to make here. I agree with Seneca, who said that Stoics do not serve a tyrant. We do not demand absolute allegiance to some untouchable orthodoxy. In his chapter on the Cambridge Companion to the Stoics, A.A. Long says this about our beliefs. Quote, Stoicism, unlike Epicureanism, was never a monolithic church, due to the fact that the Stoic philosophers themselves were creative and critical in the way that they presented the system. Stoics are now creating that's the end of A.A. Long, end of quote. Stoics are now creating a fourth branch of our philosophy after logic, ethics, and physics. I believe it should not be considered a religion, but a metaphysics. This is my personal belief. After hearing yours, now you know mine. There may be religious aspects to it. There is some overlap, but that is still under investigation at this time. I do know we can create the fourth branch of Stoic philosophy with both theory and practice. After all, that is the Stoic way, theory and practice. But a discussion of applied metaphysics must be saved for another time. It would be an entire lecture by itself. As for this lecture and this time, it is an honor for me to be here in Athens, the birthplace of our philosophy, talking to you about the recognition and development of a fourth branch of the Stoa, our metaphysics. We honor those who came before us and created a philosophy we can respect even today, 2,300 years later. We have a wonderful philosophy. And finally, I wanted to thank those who brought us together and made this day possible. And that's it.
Thank you for tuning in to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. Please visit the collegeofstoicphilosophers.org for information on the college, e-journal, and course offerings. Till next time, pro cop time.